Peace be with you. This is the Institute of All Intelligent Life. This is our 6th or 7th class, depending on whether you count the one in Urdu last week. And my name is Alan Kiesler, and our class today is about the secret space programs. We have been talking about the German secret space program, which began by 1918 or 1919 with Maria Orsic and the Vril Society and other secret German societies, which developed contact with some extraterrestrial sources and got information from them, and then were able to build what we now call flying saucers. Technological devices which enabled them to travel into space. So what we're going to talk about today is the further development of the secret space programs, especially after the United States became involved. But first, we will talk about the German space program a little bit more. It developed, as I had explained earlier, in Antarctica and underground bases in South America, secret bases, and then the Germans managed to originally fly to the moon. We're talking about the 1940s or the late 1930s. The Germans actually, before even World War I, before World War II, they had managed to develop these devices and had begun travel outside of the Earth. And of course, first they went to the moon, where they discovered there were already bases belonging to other extraterrestrial groups, and they managed to create some alliances on the basis of which they could establish their base there. And also they went to Mars and to moons, especially of Jupiter and Saturn, also Uranus, and they even managed to go into outer space beyond our solar system. So this program developed into what is now called, or what is still called and had been called, the Dark Fleet, because the most important point to understand about the Dark Fleet is it was not only a German program, but it was made possible especially by the reptilian group, or the Orion Alliance, or the Orion Empire, which they had allied themselves with. Originally, the Germans more preferred to be allied with a human-looking group, a Nordic, as they're often called, the Nordics, a Nordic group, which originally they believed, as many people believed, this group was from some other star system. Aldebaran, Pleiades, there are different star systems that evidently these people originally said they were from, but then it was discovered later that they were actually human beings who had been living on this planet, and in fact were our ancestors, you might say. And their appearance was blonde, blue-eyed, so the Germans developed this racial theory about the master race because of being in contact with those Nordics, because originally they were the ones they were more in contact with. But later, as the Nazis developed actually more and more, they became more prominent in the German secret space program rather than the German secret societies, which I mentioned earlier. They were not Nazis, but they gradually became taken over more by the Nazis. And as the Nazis developed the control of the German space program, they more and more allied themselves with the Orion group rather than the Nordics. So the late 1930s is about the time when the alliance with the extraterrestrial group, the reptilian group, became prominent, and the Germans actually started traveling out into outer space. And as it became apparent that the Germans were going to lose the war, they transferred their technology, their scientists, from Germany to Antarctica, and then from there to the moon, to Mars, to elsewhere beyond our Earth and moon, and into the solar system, and then eventually to other stars as well. So the most important point, I think, to realize at this point is just that this German attempt was very successful, and with the help of the extraterrestrials, they managed to become the predominant Earth force in outer space, and they began trade and mining operations. Especially there were some asteroids where they found valuable minerals, and so they were mining, and then they began trading with extraterrestrial groups from other star systems. And when the World War II ended, and the United States, which had some information about this through their spies in Germany, but when they finally defeated the Germans with the help of their industrial might, the United States was building so many tanks and had so many men to join the war effort because of the United States, as is well known. The British and the other Allied powers were able to defeat Germany and Italy and Japan. And finally, when the war was over and the United States realized a little bit more, again, this was all kept secret by the United States also, the attempt was made when they discovered the base in Antarctica to destroy it. And as I have mentioned, Rear Admiral Byrd, Richard Byrd, he led a major naval offensive program against the Germans in Antarctica. A huge fleet consisting of battleships, consisting of aircraft carriers, destroyers, submarines, all headed to Antarctica under the guise, because they wanted to keep it secret, the Germans had a big base there, under the guise of an expedition to the South Pole. But in fact what happened was the Germans were there, and they had advanced technology, they had these flying saucers, and they were equipped with some sort of advanced weapons by that time, something like laser beams or particle beam weapons, and they destroyed a number of the American ships and planes, and the Americans had to retreat. If you do a little research on this, you can find out it was officially stated that there was this expedition to South America, and to Antarctica rather, and it was supposed to last for several months, but in fact it only lasted a few weeks, and Admiral Byrd and the American Navy had to retreat within a few weeks. So that program that the Germans developed, which was even at that time out in space, was very successful in colonizing, making bases, and especially in trade, interstellar trade. And to date, as far as I know, that Dark Fleet is operating outside of the solar system mostly, and we will come to the modern recent history of the last few years, in which the influence of that Dark Fleet has been highly restricted by the appearance of other very, very, we might say, spiritually oriented and technologically powerful by their spiritual prowess or by their psychic prowess. They have outmaneuvered the Dark Fleet, and the Dark Fleet has been sort of excluded from our solar system. But it has for many decades been very active throughout at least the nearby stars. So when this happened, when the Americans failed to root out the German base in Antarctica as they were planning, then the United States started developing their own secret space program. And they had reverse engineered some of the German technology that they had acquired, and as I've mentioned, there was called Operation Paperclip, which was an effort, and a successful effort, by the CIA, especially American secret agencies. CIA was just developing at this time, to bring the German scientists to the United States and to engage them in creating an American space program. And again, this is not the NASA program. This was before the NASA program, and it utilized these advanced technologies, zero-point energy or free energy devices, which could travel in, outside of the solar system into the stars. So with the help of these German scientists, this is well known, the United States developed its space program, even the Apollo program with the Saturn rockets that were going out to the moon, and supposedly that's all they could do at that time. It was really, the NASA program was really a cover-up to conceal the fact that they already had these advanced technologies which they were keeping secret with flying saucers. So the United States at that time developed what came to be called, at least, the Solar Warden program, which was a program especially started by American naval intelligence. They developed, and this started in the 1950s and really reached its success. I think it took 20 years or some time like that before they could really catch up to where the Germans were, with developing not only smaller flying saucers, which started, the Germans I think started building 20 or 30 foot diameter spacecraft, which were which were made in the shape of two saucers, one on top of the other, which is where the flying saucer name came from. So those smaller craft, they then developed larger, I don't remember the exact details, 40 to 60 feet ones, and then maybe 100 to 300, 500 maybe feet flying saucers. And they may have developed larger craft, I don't know, but the United States definitely got involved, and the Germans actually, as I had said before, infiltrated the American program, utilizing the American technological and industrial might and wealth to further their space programs, which had been fairly small before the 1950s. But with the help of the United States, Germans developed their own program, their Dark Fleet program, and the Solar Warden program also developed, which was mostly controlled by the U.S. Navy. And what happened, however, very quickly is, as President Eisenhower then warned the American people and the world in his last speech as president, that we must be careful of the military-industrial complex. So the military-industrial complex was a group of aerospace companies which were working with the German scientists, and the aerospace companies, they were just after money. They weren't really motivated by any sort of agenda other than that. And the Germans utilized those aerospace companies, infiltrated them, and utilized them for their purposes. But the American military also got involved, of course. And all along there have been what we call white hats and black hats from the Western series, where there were cowboys who wore white hats, the good guys, and cowboys who wore black hats, the bad guys usually. So that terminology has been used because within the secret space program all along there have been very good, we might say patriotic, or people who really were in favor of utilizing whatever they could for a higher purpose, for the benefit of humanity. And then there were the black hats, who were the people who were just interested in making money or acquiring power for themselves or for whoever they were working with. So the American military, separate from the Dark Fleet, developed their own program called the Solar Warden, which originally was, as the name suggests, a sort of police force for the solar system. And they wanted to take over the German program, but they weren't able to. The German program went far, far beyond the American Solar Warden program. And it then further developed its own bases. Again, on Mars, a large base developed. And in the 1950s and 1960s and on into the 1970s, this is somewhat known that there were thousands and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of people who went missing, and a lot of them were scientists. These were people that were being taken to join the Solar Warden program Maybe also some of them were taken to the Dark Fleet programs. But all these people just started disappearing. And it was called the brain drain because people from different countries would go abroad, but everyone thought from the other countries that they were going to America, and some of them may have been going to America first, but then they ended going up into outer space, especially to Mars, where a huge American base gradually developed, and now there are millions of people living on Mars of different nationalities, many different nationalities. And the unfortunate thing is that although they promised everybody that you were going to be taken on a very special program to, save humanity, this was their line, that the Earth is in danger of destruction from an asteroid or from tsunamis and earthquakes, or from one atomic war. That was one thing they sort of said, we'll save you from the dangers of atomic war by taking you to our colony in Mars. So millions of people, and they were encouraged to have children, so the population gradually, not gradually, but quite quickly developed until there are really huge colonies. And we talked a little bit earlier about the problems, some of the problems the Germans had on Mars, as they discovered first that the equatorial regions, which were warmer, were dangerous because of the electrical storms that happened there regularly. So they finally settled and built some bases about the 20th parallel. So, on Mars, of course. So, the secret space program continued to develop with these two programs. However, there were, as this military-industrial complex became more powerful, free from the military program, again, as I said, the Navy program, Solar Warden, which other military branches were involved in also. They began building large craft also, beyond those flying saucers shaped, which became larger and larger. They started developing what we would call aircraft carrier type motherships. Huge, huge ships, which were spaceships, which could carry these other flying saucers, and which were up to a mile long or more, 1 or 2 kilometers long. And this information has also come out recently, that the United States, from an early time in the secret space program, in the Solar Warden program, had built these huge motherships in which the flying saucer type ships were carried, and they also, of course, could carry thousands of people, and they were cigar-shaped usually. So that was the other type of craft that's most well known, beside the flying saucers, are the huge cigar-shaped spacecraft carriers, we would say. So this Solar Warden program developed, but at the same time, or I mean later, but after not too much longer, as the aerospace programs and the German infiltration of them became more complete, they developed trade, and that became their main focus. Both exploitation of the resources, minerals, as I mentioned earlier, on some asteroids. They also found some valuable minerals on Mars, in another moon. Excuse me, it looks like I'm having a little trouble with the connection again, but we'll go on. So the military-industrial complex, which Eisenhower had named it, which he realized he was losing control of the space program. Although he never talked about the space program specifically in public, he did talk about the military-industrial complex, which he really was talking about the secret space program, which he had lost control of. Although he was the President of the United States, he had been a general in the Second World War, and he was the Commander-in-Chief. The President of the United States is the Commander-in-Chief of all the military forces, but he had lost control of this military-industrial program. And as the secret space program developed, a new organization, which was really a commercial business proposition, and it came to be called the Interplanetary Corporate Conglomerate. or ICC. So this program was, I think, mainly responsible for the Mars colony that we have heard about from various sources, including Laura Eisenhower, who was the great-granddaughter of President Eisenhower. She was one of the people who talked about having been asked to go to Mars, and she declined. She did not go. But a number of other whistleblowers who have been to Mars, as I mentioned the name of Corey Goode, he was the one who's giving by far the most information now about what was happening on Mars and in the secret space programs of which he was a participant. There were also quite a few others, some of whom have kept their identity secret. Like Corey Goode kept his identity secret at first, but gradually came out. And of course there's danger in that, especially he is married and has children, so people who have families are in more danger. They're more afraid of what could be done to them and to their families. But there have been a number of brave people who have come forward and talked about these programs, including both the Solar Warden program and the Interplanetary Corporate Conglomerate. So again, the very sad thing that happened about the Mars program was that although all these people who went were promised they would be like building up the future of humanity in a very wonderful way, when they reached Mars they were actually practically enslaved, because now they were stuck out there and they were cut off from communication, and they were told, in fact, many of them, that Earth has been destroyed. So they tried to completely prevent anything from happening like what happened in the United States or in the North American colonies. The British, as well as French and others, had colonies in what is now the United States, and 13 colonies first became independent from the British control and the French control. They became an independent United States of America. So in order to prevent something like that from happening, the Interplanetary Corporate Conglomerate made sure that these people really don't have any chance to develop something like that, to the extent that they lied to them, not only about what would happen in the future when they were taken out off the Earth, but they lied to them once they got out there that the Earth has been practically destroyed, or human civilization is destroyed on Earth, to prevent them from having any hope of reconnecting with earthly forces to create some sort of revolution against the Interplanetary Corporate Conglomerate or any of the other space programs. So that's a very, very sad part about this chapter, and still today that's going on, although there is now a struggle developing, an alliance of forces. The white hats, the good guys, are now, or good girls too, the good people are now developing with extraterrestrial help, with the help of good, powerful, spiritually oriented extraterrestrials, are now developing a strong alliance to defeat the ICC, the Interplanetary Corporate Conglomerate, and the Dark Fleet, and the other evil forces, satanic forces, really. They're very, very evil and selfish and dictatorial, and they have no qualms, they have no morals. So this program is, fortunately, just in the last few years, which we'll get into the details later, the good forces, the forces of good, are overcoming the evil forces. But the next secret space program that developed, and this there is some indication of, like I've been asked, what is the evidence of this? This is very, very hard to get evidence of. It was kept so secret, and anyone who was involved was threatened that if you reveal anything about this, not only you'll be killed, but your family, all your relatives will be tortured and killed. So it was kept very, very secret for a long time. But there was another development that happened, and Ronald Reagan, the President of the United States, was one of the active people was behind this. He realized, he understood, he found out what was going on. Although many of the presidents of the United States, such as Jimmy Carter, who I think I've mentioned before, perhaps I had met Jimmy Carter. He was the governor of Georgia, and I was living in Georgia at that time in Atlanta. And he was actually a fairly good person, very good compared to most politicians. And he was sincere. He really wanted to help the world, not just the United States. But he never could find out very much about the secret space programs. He himself had seen a UFO. You can do research on the internet. You can read actually the documents in which Jimmy Carter, long before he became president, maybe not that long, but some years before he became president, he had himself seen a UFO. He had reported this, and so he wanted to find out what's going on about UFOs. He had heard rumors, but he could not. They would not let him. In fact, this story is told by Stephen Greer, who's another person that, if you're interested in finding more about what's really going on with UFOs, is a very good source. So Stephen Greer told the story of how not only Jimmy Carter, but Bill Clinton also tried to find out about the secret space programs, but was unable to. That is, those people who were involved, who did know about them, they wouldn't tell him. Whereas others, like the Bushes, both George Sr. and George Jr. Bush, they were more in the know about what was going on. And in fact, when Jimmy Carter first became president, one of the first things he did, as Stephen Greer has narrated, was to try to find out what was really going on. So he called the head of the CIA, I think it was the day after he became president, to his office and asked, and the director of the CIA said, well, that's on a need-to-know basis. That all of that information about UFOs, about the space programs, is really something that I can't talk with you about, because I can only reveal these things to those people who have been authorized to find out about it. And you're not, even though you're the president. So Jimmy Carter, for example, and later Bill Clinton, a similar thing happened to him. By the way, the head of the CIA was George H.W. Bush, George Bush Sr. So he was not allowing the President of the United States, although he was head of CIA, he was not allowing the President of the United States to find out. But he then became president himself later, so of course he knew. But even the top, meaning the president, top government officials in the United States often did not know, or it was very, very hard for them to find out anything at all about what's really going on here, what to speak of us. Now, this is why it's been kept so secret. So Ronald Reagan was also, not as bad as many of the politicians, and he found out to some extent about the secret space programs. In fact, he was briefed by a number of scientists, and they told him that we do have spacecraft which are apart from the NASA program. And in fact, he wrote in his diary, and this is how I found about it from the book I've mentioned, Insiders Reveal Secret Space Programs and Extraterrestrial Alliances. Oh, if I want to show it, oops, I have to reverse the, here we go. A very important book, Insiders Reveal Secret Space Programs and Extraterrestrial Alliances by Michael Salla. So this book is where I'm getting most of this information now. So President Reagan wrote in his diary, his presidential diary, which was then published later, that these scientists had briefed him that we have the capacity to put 300 men in orbit. This is 1985, June 11th, 1985. In his diary, President Reagan wrote that he was informed by these scientists that we can put 300 astronauts in orbit. So obviously, this is now public information. Obviously, there was something going on besides NASA, because NASA did not have anywhere near that capacity. So Reagan then started what was the next secret space program, and you can look this up and find he gave a speech in the United Nations, which is quite well known, actually, it's quite famous, in which he said that what would happen to the United Nations and to the world if there were an extraterrestrial threat. we would all realize we really are united. We are United Nations of one humanity, and we would stop our fighting with each other because we would have to face this external threat. So what Reagan didn't publicly say was that that actually is what's happening. He just said, what if? But actually, that is what's happening. So Reagan found out about the fact that there were extraterrestrial groups, some of them quite evil and selfish and manipulative, and he wanted to create alliances, and he did actually. Even before then, the United States and Russia and other countries had been working together, but that's when it started becoming public knowledge that this sort of program could be going on. So Reagan began another program. Again, this is really, really hard to get any concrete information about, but with the cooperation of Russia and other countries, a new space program was started, which I think it calls itself, this is the name that we have been given by Corey Goode and by other people that have gotten this information from the inside and have revealed it as whistleblowers, the Global Galactic League of Nations space program. So Reagan was very, very anxious and eager that something must be done to strengthen Earth's protection, Earth's own protective abilities to defend against these extraterrestrial forces. So I think our time is getting short. It's been half an hour. So I will take a couple of minutes to answer a couple of questions. Since people have asked, I will do that. But again, my original intention was, I did think when I'm teaching like this that I will get some money also. As teaching, when I was teaching as a professor, I would get a salary. But now I've started my own institution, so nobody's giving me a salary. But I hope that people will give some fees, tuition fees. But I did decide that I will make these classes free and live online like I'm doing, because I don't want anybody to be deprived of this knowledge if they're not able to pay something. But I am requesting that you do sign up as a student, and you can give as little as $25 to have your questions answered in one class. And I will answer questions of anybody who registers. You can go online and register, and please let me know. And then I promise that I will answer your questions if you do register as a student and pay some tuition or fees. You can pay for the whole semester, and then it's only $330. And that's actually very cheap compared to tuition in many institutions in the United States, at least. So, but if you can't pay the full amount, you can get together with some of your friends and all sign up together, and I'll answer questions. But I will answer one or two questions. And somebody here has commented, Fazal Hadi, that we are proceeding towards space war. Aliens would be the masters of these wars. Well, actually, the war is going on right now. It has been going on for some time, and especially for the last few years. The good news is that the good guys, the white hats, the positive extraterrestrials are more powerful, and they are defeating the negative, selfish, satanic extraterrestrial groups and their human allies. So it's not that we are proceeding towards space war. The war is going on right now. But the good news is that it's going in the right direction. That the angelic forces are defeating the satanic forces. So somebody has commented, there is no UFO, Mehreen Alvi, but I've seen them myself. They are there, certainly. But of course, if you don't want to believe it, that's your choice. But I'm just speaking from my own experience. That's how I originally got interested in this. So let's just see what other questions or comments. Again, this idea has come up again. ETs are jinns. May or may not be. It's possible. I don't know much about jinns. I've learned a little bit more. But they are generally more negative type of beings. And some people say they're invisible, so the person you met couldn't be a jinn. Other people say, no, it's definitely a jinn. So I don't know much about jinns, but I do know that I have met persons and I have seen persons who are not human beings like we are. They may look slightly differently, they may look very similar to us. Some of them are taller than we are, some of them are smaller than we are. Some of them, as I've mentioned, the most well-known one are the Greys, who have large eyes, and then there are reptilians who have a sort of reptilian appearance, although they have 2 arms and 2 legs like we do, but they look more like reptiles. There are other groups that look more like other creatures that we are familiar with, such as birds or cats or insects with the large bulgy eyes. So there are many different varieties. Some of them may be jinns, yes. Some of them may just be different types of human beings, really. It depends on how you categorize different beings. But they are intelligent beings. There is intelligent life of many, many different forms throughout our universe. So you believe in aliens? Yes, I have met them and talked about them for quite a bit in this course. Alright, so I think I'll bring this to a close, and I hope, again, Shakil Sibtain, why UFO has only been seen in USA? No. In fact, when I was in Pakistan many years ago, I'm trying to remember about when it was, I was in Lahore maybe it was when I was teaching at FC College, I can't remember, it may have been before that even, but it was at least 10 or 15, 20 years ago maybe even. Some of my friends in Lahore told me about an appearance in Sialkot actually, and this appeared in a Pakistani newspaper even, that people had observed a saucer-shaped UFO. It appeared over a field, I think it was a rice field, and a tube, like a straw, came down into the field and sucked up a lot of water. It sucked up water, so for some reason that type of UFO needed water. So that was in Pakistan, and Pakistani people saw that. And if you go back and read some of my older Facebook posts, you'll see a number of Pakistanis have said, oh, I've seen those too, and I didn't know what they were. Some of my friends and I were out one evening and we saw this craft. So it's not only in the United States, all over the world, people have been seeing and reporting these UFOs. And if you just do a little research yourself on the internet, you will see how many places in the world people have seen UFOs. So please forgive me, Shakil Sibtain Sahib, it's not only the USA where UFOs have been seen. Alright, thank you very, very much for watching, and please be happy. Don't be worried about these extraterrestrials, aliens. I don't like the word aliens because it kind of has a negative sense. Extraterrestrials is a little bit better, or our space brothers and sisters. They are our family, they're our relatives actually. And some of them may literally be our relatives, and others may be metaphorically or spiritually our relatives. But in the ultimate sense, we're all relatives, because we all have one original source. So we're all members of one family. You can say we're all descended from one Adam, or you can say we're all creatures of one God, but the fact is that all of us are relatives. Mita kuye oyasin. We're all relatives. So please be understanding of this fact, that it's nothing to be afraid of. Although there are some extraterrestrials that are rather frightening and scary, God is all-powerful, and He is good, so we are the servants of God, so we are being protected, and we don't need to worry about those powerful extraterrestrials. There are so many stories throughout history where people who were weak, in a weak position, I mean, either militarily or politically, they were protected by God. So that's what's happening right now, that despite the attempts of these powerful extraterrestrial forces to enslave humanity and to manipulate humanity, control us, and make us their slaves, they are failing. And although we have been suffering for a long time on this planet, now the tides are turning, and we are in the midst of that very, very important period of time, which has been called the last days or the day of judgment. This is a period in human history where the forces, meaning universal forces, extraterrestrial forces also, are being defeated on this planet and in this solar system. And the kingdom of God, as we've called it, will be established on Earth. So this is a very, very critical, very, very wonderful time that we're living in. Very difficult, no doubt, very confusing, but a very, very wonderful time to be alive. And I'm so happy that I could participate in this, and you all are participating in this. We have to understand what's really going on, and with that understanding, we can participate in this wonderful effort to wrest control of our planet away from the evil cabal, is the word that we mostly use, which take the shape of international banksters, gangsters who are posing as bankers, and energy companies which are controlling the economy of the world, and their extraterrestrial allies who have been manipulating humanity for a long time. But that is now, and we'll talk about more of that in the classes in the near future, the details about how this war, which is going on right now, is turning in the favor of the forces of good. So we should all be happy for that. And we should be faithful and trusting that we will be protected and God will protect us all. Thank you very much.